They said the Alpha King never smiled. They said his eyes were the color of iron left too long in the rain, and that his voice could stop a grown wolf mid-stride with a single word. They said he had buried 2 challengers before his 25th year and had not flinched at the blood on his hands. What they did not say, because no one in the kingdom of Sorvain knew, was that the Alpha King had a weakness. She was 5'3". She smelled of crushed lavender and wood smoke, and she was currently hiding behind a flour barrel in the castle kitchens, trying not to laugh as the most powerful wolf in 3 realms crawled on his hands and knees to find her. Oriel. His voice, that infamous weapon that made warriors tremble, was soft as breath. "I can hear your heartbeat." "Then you should have found me already," she whispered from behind the barrel. "Perhaps the great Alpha King is losing his edge." A hand shot around the barrel's curve and caught her wrist. She yelped as he pulled her out of hiding, and then his arms were around her and his mouth was at her ear, and the world outside this stolen moment ceased to exist. "Never," Kale murmured against her skin. "I will never lose the ability to find you." Oriel pressed her face into his chest, breathing him in, pine and leather and the sharp undercurrent of something wilder. Even after 4 months of these secret meetings, the scent of him still made her pulse stutter. She should not be here. She was a mender, a low-born woman employed by the castle to stitch wounds and brew fever drafts for the household staff. She held no title. She claimed no bloodline. Her mother had died scrubbing floors in this same castle, and her grandmother before that. And Kale was the Alpha King of Sorvain. The distance between them should have been uncrossable. Would have been, if not for the night 4 months past when Oriel had been summoned to treat a deep wound on the king's shoulder, a gash from an assassination attempt that his personal healers had failed to close. She had stitched it with steady hands while he watched her with those storm-colored eyes, saying nothing. When she finished, he had caught her wrist, just as he had done tonight. "You did not flinch," he had said, as if this confused him. "You are flesh and bone like any other, Your Majesty. Flesh and bone I can mend." A crack had opened behind those iron eyes, and Oriel had seen, just for a moment, a man who was achingly alone. That was how it began. Secret meetings in empty corridors, conversations that stretched from dusk to dawn. The slow realization that the bond humming between them was not gratitude or infatuation, but a force far older than either of them. He had told her on the night of the first frost, his forehead pressed to hers in the darkness of the old chapel. "You are my fated mate, Oriel. My wolf has known since the moment you touched me." She had wept. Not from joy, though joy was part of it, but because she understood what those words meant for a king bound by council law and political alliance. "The rite of crowning is in 3 days," he had continued. "The council will present candidates for my queen. It is tradition. I cannot refuse the ceremony itself." His hands had cupped her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. "But I can refuse every candidate they place before me, and I will. When the rite is done, I will declare you before the kingdom. You will stand beside me, Oriel. I swear it on my blood." To seal the promise, he had done something that made her gasp. He had knelt before her, lowered his mouth to the skin just below her collarbone, and bitten down. The claiming mark. Among wolves, it was a declaration more binding than any vow spoken before witnesses. A mark given in secret meant a promise that could not be undone. His teeth had broken her skin, and warmth had flowed into the wound, settling deep in her chest and pulsing in time with his heartbeat. She had touched the mark every day since, feeling the echo of him beneath her fingertips. Now, standing in the darkened kitchen with his arms wrapped around her, Oriel pressed her hand to the spot beneath her dress. The mark throbbed with familiar heat. 3 days, she said quietly. The rite is in 3 days. Kale's arms tightened around her. I know. The council has been parading Lady Vaelith through every corridor. She watches me when I pass, Kale. like she already knows. Valeth knows nothing. His voice hardened. Her family has spent 20 years scheming to put their blood on the throne. She sees a servant and dismisses you. That is her mistake. Oriel pulled back to look at his face. In the dim light of the banked kitchen fires, his features were all sharp angles and shadow. Beautiful and hers. "And if you cannot refuse them?" she asked. "If the council forces your hand?" "The council does not command me. No one commands me. Not in this." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Oriel let herself believe him. Let herself sink into the taste of him and the fragile hope that a mender's daughter could become a queen. She did not tell him about the other secret, the one she had discovered 2 weeks ago, when persistent nausea and the tenderness in her body had driven her to brew the confirmation draft herself. She had watched the liquid turn gold in the vial, the unmistakable sign, and had sat on the floor of her chamber caught between terror and wonder. She was carrying the Alpha King's child. She had planned to tell him after the rite, after he had refused the candidates and declared their bond before the kingdom. After she was safe, and their child was safe, and the world could not use this miracle as a weapon against them. 3 more days. She just needed 3 more days. Oriel held Kale tighter and pressed her secret against his chest, guarding it with her silence. She did not know that silence would cost her everything. The rite of crowning was held in the throne hall of Ashenmere, a chamber carved from the bones of the mountain itself. Oriel had never seen it filled. She had scrubbed its floors as a girl, had polished the stone seats that ringed the central dais like the teeth of some great beast. But tonight, every seat was occupied. Nobles from the 9 provinces, pack leaders from territories so distant their dialects were barely comprehensible, warriors in ceremonial leathers, elders draped in white, and at the heart of it all, elevated on the obsidian platform that only the Alpha King could stand upon, was Kale. Oriel watched from the musicians' gallery above, pressed against the carved railing where shadows swallowed the candlelight. She had told herself she would not come, had told herself to wait in her chamber as they had agreed. But the silence from him over the past 2 days had been unbearable. No message, no stolen visit, no whispered reassurance through the bond that pulsed beneath her collarbone. Just a vast aching nothing where his presence used to be. So she had come to see for herself. Kale stood on the obsidian platform wearing the black and silver of the royal line, but his stillness was wrong. The fluid power that lived in his body, the wolf that moved beneath his skin like water beneath ice, was absent. He stood the way a puppet stands when its strings are pulled taut. "Let the candidates approach," the High Seneschal called. "Let the bloodlines of Sorvain present their daughters to the crown." 6 women in white ascended the dais steps, and leading them, her silver blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders, her pale eyes reflecting torchlight like chips of winter's sky, was Valeth of House Denvar. The crowd stirred with approval. The Denvaras held the iron mines and the mountain passes. Their private army numbered 4,000. Oriel's hand moved to her claiming mark. It was burning. Not the warm pulse she had grown accustomed to. This was sharp, insistent, and wrong. "The kingdom awaits your decision," the seneschal intoned. The hall fell silent. Oriel searched his face for the man she knew, for the warmth that softened his iron eyes when he looked at her. She found nothing. His eyes stared ahead with the flat vacancy of a man who was not truly present. Kale stepped forward. His movement was jerky, disconnected, a body moving without the mind that should have governed it. "I choose," he said. His voice was hollow, scraped clean of every texture she loved. "Valeth of House Denvar." The throne hall erupted. Howls of celebration shook dust from the ceiling. Nobles surged to their feet. Warriors slammed fists against their chests in the old gesture of approval. The sound was deafening, a wall of noise that crashed over Oriel and drove the air from her lungs. The mark caught fire. Oriel doubled over against the railing, a strangled cry tearing from her throat. Pain radiated from the mark outward, scorching through her veins, burning along her ribs as if the bond itself was being ripped from her body. Through the agony, she watched Kale take Valeth's hand, watched him lift it to his lips, watched Valeth's mouth curve into a smile of triumph while the man Oriel loved stared at nothing with the eyes of a stranger. He did not look up. He did not search the gallery for her face. He did not seem to know she existed at all. A sound escaped Oriel that she would never be able to describe. Not a scream, not a sob. The noise a body makes when the thing holding it together is suddenly gone. She pushed away from the railing and stumbled through the gallery. Her hand was clamped over the mark. Her other arm was wrapped around her stomach, around the secret she would now carry alone. His child, growing inside her while he pledged himself to another woman. The gallery stairs blurred beneath her feet. She nearly fell twice, catching herself against cold stone walls that offered no comfort. The corridors were deserted. Every soul in the castle had gone to witness the rite, leaving behind only silence and shadows and a woman whose world was ending. Oriel's chamber was barely larger than a closet, a narrow bed, a washstand, a wooden chest that held everything she owned in this world, which was almost nothing at all. She packed without thinking. Her hands moved on their own, folding the 2 spare dresses, wrapping her mother's bone comb in a scrap of cloth, tucking the herbs she used for the nausea into the bundle's center where they would not be crushed. The sounds of celebration drifted through the walls, drums and howls and the rhythmic stamping of feet that meant the formal dances had begun. Somewhere in that hall, Kale was standing beside Valeth, accepting the congratulations of a kingdom that believed its future had been secured. And somewhere in this tiny room, a woman with no name and no house was erasing herself from his life. Oriel paused at the window. The capital spread below in a blaze of torchlight, bonfires blooming across the rooftops like orange flowers. She could see the great market square where vendors would already be selling commemorative tokens. The bridge over the ash water where lovers walked on festival nights. The road south, winding into darkness, into the unknown, into whatever came after the complete destruction of everything she had believed. Her hand found her belly, flat still, barely showing. A life that did not yet know the cruelty of the world it would enter. "I will keep you safe," she whispered. "Whatever it costs me. Whatever I have to become." She cinched the bundle closed and pulled her cloak from its hook. Dark wool, patched at the elbows, unremarkable. The cloak of a woman no one would think twice about. At the door, she stopped, pressed her fingers to the narrow bed where Kale had once sat beside her, brushing the hair from her face, where he had pressed his mouth to the mark he had made and sworn that she was the only thing in his kingdom worth fighting for. The memory was a blade, and she let it cut. Then she shouldered her bundle, slipped through the servants' passage, and stepped into the winter night. The cold hit her like a fist. Wind screamed down from the mountains, carrying ice crystals that stung her cheeks and buried themselves in her hair. The servants' gate was unguarded, every soldier reassigned to the celebration. She did not look back. If she had, she would have seen a shape appear in the high window of the king's tower, a figure gripping the stone sill with white-knuckled hands, swaying as if fighting invisible chains. If she had listened past the wind, she would have heard the howl that tore from that tower moments later. So raw, so shattered, that wolves sleeping in dens 20 miles distant woke with their hackles raised. And if she had waited 1 hour more, she would have seen the Alpha King stagger into her empty chamber, fall to his knees beside her narrow bed, and press his face into the pillow that still carried her scent. But Oriel did not look back. She walked into the storm, one hand on her belly and the other clutching the cloak around her shoulders, and let the darkness swallow her whole. By morning, the snow had buried her footprints. She was gone. 4 months had passed since the night Oriel disappeared into the storm. The village of Brannock Hollow sat in a valley so deep that sunlight only reached its cobblestones for 6 hours a day. Shepherds and root farmers and a handful of tradespeople who had chosen obscurity over ambition, the perfect place to vanish. Oriel had arrived in the dead of winter, half frozen, her lips blue and her cloak stiff with ice. She had told the village elder, a weathered woman named Dagna, a simple story. Her husband had been killed in a border skirmish. She was a mender by trade. Dagna had given her the empty cottage beyond the mill bridge. "The roof leaks in the northeast corner," she had said, "and the hearth smokes when the wind shifts. But it is walls and a door, and that is more than grief usually leaves us." Now the snow had retreated to the highest ridgelines. Oriel had become the woman Brannock Hollow needed without realizing it. She lanced boils. She brewed willow bark tea for the older farmers. She delivered the tanner's wife of a healthy son and saved the blacksmith's thumb when a hammer blow went wrong. The villagers called her Sable. They asked no further questions. But the walls Oriel had built were cracking. Every night, after the last patient had gone and the cottage door was bolted, she sat beside the fire with her hands on her belly and felt the child move. The movements had grown stronger, more insistent. Sometimes she felt pressure in 2 places at once, a push against her ribs and a kick near her hip, simultaneous and distinct. Twins. She was almost certain now. The village midwife, Petra, had measured her belly 3 times during her last visit. "You are too large for how far along you claim to be. Either your dates are wrong, or there is more than one child growing in there." Twins. The Alpha King's twins. Growing inside a woman who no longer existed. The thought of Kale still arrived like a wound reopened. All those months, and the pain had not dulled. She had tried to hate him, had assembled the evidence, the empty eyes, the chosen hand, the silence that had preceded the betrayal. But the mark would not let her hate him. That was the part that made no sense. The claiming scar should have faded within weeks of his public rejection. Among wolves, when a bond was broken by choice, the mark dissolved like frost in sunlight. The skin healed. Both parties moved forward, scarred but free. Oriel's mark had not faded. It had darkened. What had been a pale crescent of tooth marks was now a deep wine-colored brand that pulsed with heat she could not explain. It burned when the wind blew from the north, from the direction of Ashenmere. It ached in the hours before dawn, and sometimes, in the space between waking and sleep, she felt a presence through it, vast and desperate, searching, as if he was clawing through the dark, trying to find her across hundreds of miles. But he had chosen Valeth. The bond should have died the moment those words left his mouth. Unless the bond had never been his to break. Oriel pushed the thought down every time it surfaced. False hope was a luxury she could not afford. She had children to protect, and a past to bury. She pressed her palms to her belly, felt the twin kicks answer her touch, and whispered the same words she whispered every night. "You will never know his name. You will never know what he did. And you will never, ever need him the way I did." The words felt like a promise. They tasted like a lie. The peddler arrived on a Tuesday, his cart rattling over the mill bridge with a noise that brought half the village to their doors. Oriel kept her distance. She had learned to be cautious with outsiders. Her dark hair, once long enough to reach her waist, was cropped short and hidden beneath a linen wrap. She wore the rough spun clothes of a village mender and kept her eyes downcast around anyone she did not recognize. It was young Haddon, the miller's boy, who brought the news to her door. 12 years old and incapable of keeping information to himself. "Mistress Sable, the peddler has come from the north, from near the capital. He says the kingdom has gone dark." Oriel's hand stilled on the mortar she had been grinding. "Dark?" "He says the Alpha King has lost his mind, that he has been tearing through every province, burning through gold and soldiers, hunting for a woman no one can name. The peddler says the king's eyes have turned gold and will not shift back. He says the wolf is taking over. The mortar slipped from Oriel's fingers and cracked against the table. He says the harvests in the eastern provinces have failed because the land can feel the alpha's rage. He says wolves have gone feral across the northern territories. He says the king's guard has been sent to every village in the realm, showing a description of a woman no one recognizes. Oriel gripped the edge of the table. What description? Dark hair, small build, a mender's hands. Haddon's eyes were wide. The reward is 15,000 gold coins for anyone who leads the king to her. 15,000, a sum that could buy a village like Brannock Hollow 3 times over. And the peddler says the king has not slept since midwinter, that he sits in the dark and speaks to someone who is not there, calling a name no one in the court has ever heard. Oriel lowered herself into her chair. He was searching for her. The crops were failing. The wolves were going feral. The Alpha King was dissolving his own kingdom to find a woman he had publicly discarded. Why? If the rejection had been genuine, the bond would have released them both. He would be ruling beside his chosen queen, forgetting the mender's daughter who had been foolish enough to believe she could hold the heart of a king. Instead, he was destroying everything, unless the choice had never been his. The claiming scar flared with sudden heat, and Oriel gasped. Sharper than usual, more focused, as if the presence she felt through the bond had intensified, as if he was closer. And somewhere in the back of her mind, beneath the fear and the grief, a voice she could not silence whispered a single word. Run. She did not run. 3 days after the peddler's visit, on an evening when fog rolled through the valley so thick it turned the world to gray wool, Oriel opened her cottage door to find a woman standing on her threshold. Tall and lean, with a long scar running from her left temple to the corner of her jaw. Her eyes were deep, burnished amber. My name is Seren. I serve as second to the Alpha King, though at this moment, I am not certain how much longer there will be an Alpha King to serve. Seren entered the cottage and delivered her report with the flat precision of a soldier. The night of the rite, someone introduced a compound into the king's food. A derivative of ashwolf root, mixed with agents our physicians cannot identify. It severed the connection between the king and his wolf entirely. He was not making a choice that night. He was a body without a mind, responding to prompts rehearsed and implanted during the 2 days he was kept isolated before the ceremony. The 2 days of silence. The 2 days when no message came. He had not been preparing. He had been imprisoned in his own body. 3 days after the rite, he came out of it violently. The first word he spoke was your name. The first thing he did was run to find you. Your chamber was empty. Seren paused. That was the moment we began to lose him. An Alpha King separated from his true mate undergoes a specific deterioration. The wolf fights for dominance. Over time, the wolf wins. The human is buried. She met Oriel's eyes. He has perhaps 6 weeks before the shift becomes permanent. After that, there is no coming back. Oriel stared at the fog-shrouded valley. Why should I believe any of this? How do I know the Denvaras did not send you? Because the Denvaras are the ones who want you dead. Seren produced a letter bearing the Denvara sigil, the mountain and crossed blades. 3 lines. The mender has been located in the southern valleys. Dispatch riders before the next moon. The king must have nothing to return to. Long live Queen Valeth. I need proof beyond a letter that could have been forged, Oriel said. Beyond a story that conveniently absolves the king. I need something real. Seren regarded her for a long moment. Then she pulled aside her collar. Above her heart was a brand, burned deep, in the shape of a wolf's paw. The king gave this when I swore my oath as his second. It binds my life to his. If he dies, I die. If he goes feral, I follow. I did not travel 400 miles through hostile territory to deliver a trap. I came because if I do not bring you back, I will lose my king, my mind, and my life. In that order. Oriel turned from the window. Her mind was churning, running calculations she did not want to run. If Seren was telling the truth, then every assumption she had built her exile on was wrong. Every night she had spent hating Kale had been a night spent hating a man who had been violated, not one who had chosen to abandon her. And every day she had spent hiding was a day closer to losing him forever. But if Seren was lying, then walking back to Ashenmere meant walking into the arms of the people who wanted her and her children dead. She looked at the two small garments hanging by the hearth. Tiny shirts stitched by hand for newborns. She had imagined dressing her children in them. Had imagined a quiet life where no one knew their father's name and no one came looking. That life was already over. The Denvars had seen to that. When will their riders reach the valley? We estimate 2 days. Perhaps less. 2 days before professional killers arrive to eliminate the Alpha King's true mate and unborn heirs. Then we do not have time for me to deliberate, Oriel said. She pressed her hands to her belly, felt the answering kicks from both sides, and made the decision that would change everything. Tell me your plan. Before Seren could answer, her head snapped toward the window. The amber in her eyes blazed bright. Too late, she breathed. They are already here. The first arrow came through the window before Oriel could draw her next breath. It buried itself in the wall behind her head. Seren seized Oriel and threw her sideways as a second arrow punched through the shutters, leaving a dark, wet trail on the stone. Poison. Oriel could smell it, a bitter chemical reek. 6 in the tree line, 2 circling the back, a handler staying behind the pack. 8 attackers. 1 pregnant woman. 1 warrior. Seren pressed a silver-laced blade into Oriel's hand. If anything gets past me, cut first and ask questions after. Seren, I am 7 months pregnant. I can barely reach my own feet. Then aim for the throat. You will not need to bend. Seren shifted. Where a scarred woman had stood, a tawny wolf now crouched, lean and coiled. She launched herself through the shattered window into the fog. The sounds that followed were brutal. Snarls and the wet crack of jaws meeting flesh, a flash of tawny fur through the mist, a spray of dark blood against white fog. Then the back door buckled inward. 2 wolves poured through, enormous, dark-furred eyes holding calculating intelligence. They had been sent. They had been aimed. Aimed at her. Oriel raised the silver blade. The babies kicked frantically inside her. The first wolf lunged. She slashed, catching it across the muzzle. Silver bit into flesh. The animal screamed, a horribly human sound, and crashed into the table. The second wolf was already in the air. A force erupted from inside Oriel's chest. Not the mark. Deeper. A power that had been sleeping in her blood since the day she was born, passed down through generations of women who healed with their hands and never asked where the gift came from. Golden light exploded from her palms. The wolf hit an invisible wall of radiance and was flung backward, its dark fur smoking where the light had touched it. Oriel stared at her glowing hands, not the faint warmth of her healing gift. This was blazing, incandescent, pulsing in time with the heartbeats of the children inside her. The remaining wolf fled. From outside, the sounds of battle shifted. Then a voice cut through the fog. A masked handler with a crossbow, bearing the Denvar sigil. The Denvars want the mender dead and the brats with her. Nothing personal. Just the tidying of loose ends. The crossbow rose toward Oriel's chest. Seren tried to move, but her wounded leg buckled. The ground began to shake. Trees cracked and fell. The earth shuddered with the rhythm of something massive approaching at impossible speed. A roar split the night, deep and vast, vibrating with a fury that tore the remaining fog apart. The handler fired. The bolt never reached Oriel. A shape erupted from the tree line, black as a starless sky, enormous beyond reason. It crossed the clearing in a single stride and intercepted the bolt mid-flight, the projectile shattering against a shoulder thick with muscle and midnight fur. The wolf that stood between Oriel and the handler was the largest living thing she had ever seen. Its head was level with the cottage roof. Its eyes burned with a gold so intense it cast actual light, twin furnaces set in a face built for destruction. The handler stumbled backward. "No, you are not supposed to be here yet." The wolf's jaws closed around her. The sound was brief. The silence after was absolute. The great wolf turned. Those blazing golden eyes swept the clearing, then found Oriel. She stood in the doorway of her ruined cottage, the silver blade in one hand, the other arm wrapped around her belly. Golden light still flickered around her fingers. She was shaking so hard her teeth rattled, and the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms lowered its great head and whimpered. The wolf approached her the way one approaches something sacred. Each step was slow, deliberate, as if the creature feared that moving too quickly would cause her to vanish. The golden eyes that had blazed with killing fury moments before were now soft, wide, searching her face with an intensity that was almost unbearable. The bond beneath her collarbone was screaming, not with pain but with a frequency beyond language, the sound of 2 broken things finding the edges where they fit together. The wolf lowered its massive head until its nose was level with her belly. With a gentleness that seemed impossible from a creature that had just killed without hesitation, it pressed its muzzle against the curve where its children grew. Both babies kicked. The wolf made a sound Oriel would carry with her for the rest of her life, something between a growl and a whimper. Recognition, devastation. A father feeling his children for the first time. "Kale," she whispered. The shift was instantaneous. One heartbeat, a wolf. The next, a man on his knees in the blood-soaked earth, his hands hovering over her stomach as if it was made of glass. The Alpha King of Sorvain was thoroughly ruined. The face she had memorized in candlelight was gaunt, the cheekbones cutting against skin gone gray with exhaustion. His hair was tangled with leaves and burrs from days in wolf form. His hands were trembling, but his eyes were his own. Storm gray, not gold. The man, not the wolf. He was still in there. "You are real," he breathed. His voice was raw and cracked. "You are alive. You are—" His gaze dropped to her belly. "Oriel, are you—" "Yes." The word came out hard, sharpened by months of grief that could not be softened by a single moment of tenderness. "I am carrying your children." His face crumpled. "Children? Why did you not—" "When exactly would I have done that, Kale? Before the rite? When you went silent for 2 days? Or after? When you stood on that platform and chose another woman while I watched from the gallery with your child growing inside me? I did not choose her. My mind was not in my body that night. A compound, a poison. They took my wolf, Oriel. They severed me from every instinct, every bond, and every piece of myself that would have known you were watching." "How convenient," she spat, even as the claiming scar burned with the unmistakable pulse of truth. "You vanish for 2 days. You choose another woman before the entire kingdom. And now you appear with a story that makes you the victim. Because I am the victim." His voice broke, not with self-pity, with fury. "Do you think I chose to wake up 3 days after the rite with Valeth in my chambers? Do you think I chose to spend these months with my wolf clawing its way out of my skull because the bond was screaming your name and I could not find you?" Through the bond, she could feel the truth of it. Not words she had to evaluate, sensation she could not fake. His anguish matched her own with a precision that nearly knocked her sideways. "I threw Valeth out of my rooms the moment I understood what had happened. I have not spoken to her since. I have not been anything resembling a functional human being since the morning I walked into your empty chamber and found nothing but a cold bed and the ghost of your scent on the pillow." Oriel's eyes burned. She would not cry. She had spent months crying and she was finished with it. But the mark would not let her lie to herself. She could feel him through it now, clearer than ever. His emotions bled into hers like ink into water. And what she felt was not calculation. It was devastation, bone deep. The grief of a man who had lost everything and clawed his way through madness to kneel in the dirt at her feet. "I waited for you," she said, and her voice cracked. "That night, I was going to tell you about the baby. I had the words prepared." She pressed her fist against his sternum. "Do you know what it feels like to watch the person you love choose someone else, while you are carrying their child?" He covered her fist with both hands. "I know exactly what it feels like, because I have spent every moment since that night living inside the knowledge that I was used as a weapon against you, Oriel. My body, my voice, my hands. They took all of it and pointed it at the person I would die to protect." The bond pulsed between them, not with pain, with recognition. Two broken pieces remembering the shape they were supposed to make together. Oriel let out a breath she had been holding since the night of the rite. She did not forgive him. Forgiveness was not what this moment required. What it required was the harder thing. The choice to believe that the worst night of her life had not been a betrayal, but a crime committed against both of them. "May I?" he asked, his hand hovering near her belly. She took his hand and pressed it flat. Both babies kicked simultaneously, movements from opposite sides, as if two small bodies were trying to reach their father's palm from different directions. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, and not quite a sob. "Two. There are two of them. They are strong. They are strong because they had to be. Like their mother." "Like their mother," he agreed. "The bravest person I have ever known." From the edge of the clearing, Seren watched in silence. Her hand pressed the brand above her heart, and for the first time in months, the burning had eased. The king had found his mate. There was still time. They rode north through the night. Kale had brought horses and a small guard, 12 warriors who had followed him through the wilderness when the kingdom's military structure had fractured. They formed a protective ring around Oriel the moment their king placed her on his saddle and mounted behind her. His wolf was not going to allow separation. She could feel the animal beneath his skin, pressing outward, a constant low vibration that hummed through his body into hers. The wolf had spent months clawing at the walls of his mind, howling into the void where the bond should have been. Now that the void was filled, it would not relinquish contact. In the darkness, Kale told her everything, the 2 days before the rite. The private dinner with the council elders. Food that tasted slightly bitter. The sensation of his wolf being pulled away, like a hand pried from a ledge, finger by finger. "I tried to hold on," he said, his voice low against her hair. "I could feel it happening. And then, there was nothing. Just silence where my wolf had always been." Waking 3 days later, the confusion, the slow, horrifying realization that his body had done things his mind had no record of. Vailith in his chambers in a ceremonial nightgown, smiling. "I put her through the door," Kale said flatly. "The actual door. The wood splintered. My guards thought I had gone feral. Perhaps I had. The search. The systematic dismantling of his own kingdom. Logic giving way to instinct. Following the bond in the dark like a compass needle he could never quite calibrate. Some nights I could almost hear you," he murmured. "Not words. Just presence. A warmth at the edge of my mind. My wolf would howl and I would feel a faint answer, like an echo from the bottom of a well." Oriel's throat tightened. She knew exactly what he was describing. The dreams. The sense of being reached for in the dark. "I felt it too," she admitted. "I told myself it was my mind playing tricks. That I was imagining things because I was alone and afraid, and I wanted so badly for you to still be looking for me. I never stopped looking. Not for a single breath." They rode in silence for a while. The forest thinned as they climbed toward the northern pass. Stars appeared through breaks in the canopy, cold and indifferent to the dramas unfolding beneath them. "The babies. Kale said eventually, his hand spreading across her belly where the children had settled into sleep. When did you know? 2 weeks before the rite. I brewed the confirmation draft myself. Watched it turn gold and sat on the floor of my chamber and could not decide whether to laugh or scream. You should have told me. I was going to. That night. After the rite. I had the words ready. She closed her eyes. The memory was still vivid. She had stood before the spotted glass in her tiny room, one hand on her flat belly, practicing the smile that was supposed to accompany it. I was going to say, "My king has given his kingdom an heir, and his mender has given him a family." The sound Kale made was barely human. His face pressed into the curve of her neck, and she felt the wetness of tears against her skin. The Alpha King of Sorvain was crying into her hair while his horse carried them through the dark. She reached back and placed her hand against his cheek. Held him there. Let him break apart against her shoulder, because he had been holding himself together with nothing but rage and the fading warmth of a bond he could not find, and he deserved this. They both did. "We are going to survive this," she said. "I know. Because you did not let them break you. Alone, pregnant, hunted, and you built a life. You healed people. You delivered children. You fought off wolves with a power you did not even know you had." He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was months of separation compressed into a single point of contact. Through the bond, she felt everything. His love, not quiet affection, but a savage, all-consuming force. His terror at the handler's crossbow aimed at her belly. And beneath it all, a need so fundamental it predated language. When they broke apart, the claiming scar was glowing faintly through the fabric of her dress. Golden light pulsing in time with their shared heartbeat. They crested the northern pass at dawn. Below them, the kingdom of Sorvain spread like a map brought to life. And at the center, rising from the banks of the Ashwater, the fortress of Ashenmere. But the fortress was wrong. The great banner bearing the royal sigil, the silver wolf on black, had been replaced. In its place flew the mountain and crossed blades of House Denvar. "They have taken Ashenmere," Kale said. His voice was very calm, the kind of calm that comes before devastation. "While I was searching for my mate, the Denvars stole my throne." A scout reached them gasping. "Lord Kavreth Denvar has declared himself regent. Lady Valith has been proclaimed queen. They have taken 29 prisoners. Everyone who refused to swear loyalty. They are to be executed at midday. Including the old mender who served in the lower quarters, the one called Brigid. Brigid, the woman who had trained Oriel, who had held her hand the night her mother died and said, 'Grief is the price of love, child. Do not ever wish you had not paid it.' We save them," Oriel said. "All of them. Today." Kale's 12 wolves should not have been enough against the Denvars' garrison of 200. But the 12 who rode with the Alpha King were not ordinary soldiers. They were wolves who had followed their king into madness and out the other side. Wolves who had watched him unravel and had chosen to stay when every rational voice told them to leave, and they were not alone. As Kale's force descended toward the city, shapes emerged from the forests and farms and villages that dotted the valley. Wolves who had felt the bond's restoration ripple through the land like the first tremor of an earthquake. Wolves who had gone feral under the weight of their alpha's suffering and were now returning to themselves, blinking and furious. They came in ones and twos and then in dozens, falling into formation behind their king, until the 12 had become 200. The Denvar garrison looked down from the walls and saw an army. Oriel watched from the ridge as Kale shifted and led the charge. The Black Wolf was magnificent, a force of nature that hit the outer defenses like a storm making landfall. The Denvar soldiers fought. But they were mercenaries defending a stolen throne, and the wolves that crashed against them were fighting for something far more primal. Within 2 hours, the outer walls had fallen. The lower city was secured. But Lord Kavreth sealed himself inside the throne hall with the prisoners, Execute every hostage unless the king submitted to exile. Oriel found Kale at the gates, held at bay by Seren. If you walk in there, he wins, Seren was saying. He will kill the hostages anyway. Kale? Oriel's voice cut through the argument. He does not want me. I am a loose end, not a prize. A pregnant mender with no title and no army. Let me offer myself in exchange for the hostages. Absolutely not. You are carrying my children. You are not sending me. I am choosing to go. 29 people are about to die, and I can stop it. And I will not live with their blood on my hands. Not when they bled for me first. She placed her hand flat against his chest. I love you, she said. I loved you when I thought you had destroyed me. I loved you through all those months of exile when the only thing keeping me alive was the knowledge that your children were growing inside me. And I love you now, which is why I need you to trust me. Please, let me do this. His hand covered hers. If he hurts you, then you will come for me. The way you always do. He kissed her forehead. Go, and come back to me. Lord Cavreth, she called across the courtyard. My name is Oriel. I am the woman your family has been trying to kill. I am coming in alone. Inside, 29 people knelt on the obsidian platform, hands bound. Bridget at the front, chin lifted in defiance. Cavreth sat on the stolen throne, Valeth beside him. The kitchen girl has returned, Valeth said, and she has brought the king a belly full of complications. Oriel ignored her. Take me as your hostage. Release the prisoners. The king's mate carrying his heirs is worth more than 29 pawns you will have to kill. The girl makes a compelling point, Cavreth said. Release the prisoners. Secure the mender. As Bridget was pushed toward the exit, she called, Run, girl. Whatever you are planning, it is not worth your life. Oriel met her eyes and smiled. Everything is worth the right life, Bridget. You taught me that. The doors closed. Oriel was alone with the Denvares. Valeth circled her. All these months we have been trying to erase you, and here you are, walking through our front door. Here I am, Oriel agreed. Her voice was steady. Her heart was a war drum, and deep in her chest, deeper than the bond, deeper than fear, the babies moved inside her. Both of them. At the same time. Power. Rising like a tide. Lord Cavreth drew his sword. Silver-treated steel, designed to kill a wolf in any form. This was never personal. An obstacle to a plan 20 years in the making. My daughter was meant to sit on that throne. You, a mender's daughter with dirt under her fingernails, were never part of the design. And yet here I am, carrying the heirs you tried to replace. He raised the blade, and the babies moved. Not kicked. Moved. Both of them, with a force that radiated outward from her womb, like a flame running along a fuse. Golden light erupted from Oriel's skin. This was not her healing power amplified by desperation. This was the power of a true mate bond, the living proof of a connection so rare it had not occurred in the royal line for 7 generations. And those children had their own opinions about being murdered. The shockwave slammed Cavreth backward. The light poured into Oriel's bones, found the claiming mark, and ignited it. The mark blazed white gold, and with it came a pain so absolute she dropped to her knees. Not the pain of injury, the pain of becoming. Her bones began to break. She screamed as her skeleton restructured, spine curving, fingers shortening into claws. Her skin rippled as the wolf fought to emerge. All through her exile, the wolf had been dormant, suppressed by ignorance, by common blood that should never have carried the shift. The claiming mark had planted the seed. Pregnancy had nurtured it. Now, the children had triggered the change. Kill her! Valeth shrieked, before she completes the change. Soldiers rushed forward. They never reached her. The golden light detonated. A wall of radiance swept outward, hurling soldiers against stone walls. The sound was not an explosion, it was a note, deep and sustained, the note of a wolf being born. Where Oriel had knelt, a wolf now stood. Her fur was the color of dark amber, shot through with veins of gold that pulsed with fading light. Her eyes burned with a light entirely her own, gold laced with green. Impossible, Kavreth breathed. Common blood cannot carry the shift. Oriel lunged. Her jaws found his sword arm and bit down with every ounce of fury she had accumulated across months of exile and heartbreak. Bone cracked. The sound was deeply satisfying. 6 remaining soldiers encircled her. Bad odds for a newly shifted wolf with no combat training and 2 babies to protect. The throne hall doors exploded inward. Not opened. Destroyed. Iron bracings snapped like twigs. Through the wreckage came a wolf of nightmare and legend, black as the void between stars, eyes blazing with golden fire. Kale had not waited. Wolves poured through behind their king. Seren's tawny form led the charge, followed by a tide of gray and brown and silver. The Denvara soldiers broke. Blades clattered. Men dropped to their knees. In the chaos, Valeth retrieved her father's silver blade. "You were nothing," she hissed. "A servant, a stain, and you have taken everything from me." She charged. Oriel did not dodge. She shifted back to human, her body flowing between forms with a fluidity that should not have been possible for someone who had shifted for the first time minutes ago. She stood barefoot, dress in tatters, one hand on her belly, and she caught the blade. The silver hissed against her palm. Pain seared up her arm. Blood ran between her fingers, but she held. "You are right," Oriel said quietly. "I was a servant, a mender's daughter, a woman with dirt under her fingernails and no bloodline worth recording." She twisted the blade from Valeth's grip. "But I am also the woman who walked through a winter storm with the Alpha King's children in her body. The woman who built a life from nothing while your family sent assassins to end it. The woman who walked into this hall alone so that 29 innocent people could walk out alive." She let the sword ring against the obsidian. "I was never nothing, Valeth. You simply could not see what I was." Kale shifted behind her. "Valeth of House Denvar, you and your father are charged with treason against the crown, conspiracy to poison the Alpha King, attempted murder of the true queen and the royal heirs. You chose me," Valeth spat. The rite was a performance staged by your family using my drugged body as a puppet. It was void the moment the poison touched my blood. It was always void." Guards took Violeth and Kavreth. Kale cupped Oriel's face, tilting it up. "You shifted," he said, his voice cracking. The children triggered it. She felt twin movements beneath her palm, gentle now, exhausted. "They protected me when I could not protect myself." "You caught a silver blade with your bare hand." She looked at her palm. The wound was already closing. "I had motivation." He pulled her against his chest. "My brave, impossible mate." Bridget found Oriel in the corridor outside the hall. The old mender took one look at her former apprentice, standing barefoot in a ruined dress with blood on her hands and a belly full of royal airs, and burst into tears. "I knew," Bridget said, "the moment you started disappearing at night, the way you smiled when you thought no one was watching. I knew, and I kept your secret, and I would do it again 1,000 times." Oriel held her and let herself weep. Not from grief. From the sheer, overwhelming relief of being known. Later, she found Kale on the balcony above the throne hall. Ashenmere spread below in the golden light of late afternoon, smoke rising from pockets of the city where the fighting had been heaviest. But already, she could see signs of recovery. Market stalls being righted, doors opening, people emerging to begin rebuilding. "The bond," he said. "It is still incomplete." Oriel knew. He had marked her. She had not marked him. The bond was a door that opened only one way. He tilted his head. Slowly, deliberately, he bared the left side of his throat, the vulnerable curve where the pulse beat closest to the surface. Among wolves, an alpha offering his throat was offering his life. his trust, his unconditional submission to the mate who would hold his most vital point between her teeth. "Claim me," he said. "If I do this, I will see everything, and you will see everything. No walls, no secrets, no distance. I want all of it. I want to know exactly what they cost us so that I never forget and never allow it to happen again." Oriel rose on her toes. Her lips found the spot where his pulse hammered. She could feel his wolf pressing forward, trembling, an animal about to be made whole. She bit down. The bond completed. Oriel felt herself pour into Kale and felt him pour into her. Not thoughts, not memories, the emotional architecture of everything they had lived through apart. She saw the right through his experience, his wolf being dragged under, clawing at the surface, screaming her name into a void. The cold emptiness of a body moving without a mind, the horror of waking 3 days later in a world rearranged without his consent. She felt him run to her chamber, felt the ground drop when he found it empty, felt the howl his body made when the thing holding it together was suddenly absent. She lived his months of searching, the systematic destruction of his own composure, the nights shifting between man and wolf because neither form could contain the grief, the way his advisors stopped meeting his eyes, the way his kingdom frayed at the edges as its alpha unraveled. The moment 3 weeks in, when the wolf had tried to take permanent control and Kale had fought it back with nothing but the memory of her voice saying, "You are flesh and bone like any other," and he saw hers. The storm she had walked through with his children in her body, the ice that cut her face and buried itself in her hair. The village that took her in under a false name, the nights crying into a pillow that smelled of wood smoke instead of pine and leather. Her hands on the bellies of other women as she delivered their children, knowing her own would arrive without a father. The mark that burned when the wind blew north. The moment she had decided to stop loving him. And the moment, seconds later, when she realized she could not. He felt the wolves at her cottage, the golden light erupting from her palms, the fury and the fierce refusal to let anyone take what was hers. When Oriel released his throat, they were both on their knees on the cold stone balcony. His arms were around her. The bond between them pulsed with warmth, and across the valley, wolves lifted their heads and felt something settle into place. Their alpha had found his mate. The bond was complete. The kingdom had its center again. "My queen," Kale whispered. "My king," she answered. They stayed like that as the sun sank behind the mountains. Two people who had survived the worst thing that could be done to them, not by being strong alone, but by finding their way back to each other through poison and exile, and the stubborn refusal of a bond that would not break. In the weeks that followed, the Denvaras faced judgment. Lord Cavrith was tried before the assembled packs. The evidence was overwhelming. Correspondence detailing the procurement of the Ashwolf root compound, payments to the castle servants who had administered it, orders to the assassins dispatched to the southern valleys. He offered no defense. When the verdict was delivered, he accepted it with the blank-eyed silence of a man who had always known his ambitions would end either on the throne or on the scaffold. He did not reach the throne. Vaelith was stripped of her name, her house, and her wolf. The severing was performed by the High Seneschal in the same throne hall where she had once stood smiling beside a drugged king. When the amber faded permanently from her eyes, she was escorted to the eastern borderlands and released into exile. She walked into the wilderness without looking back, a woman who had gambled everything on a stolen crown and lost it all. The kingdom healed the way a body heals after a long fever. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed as the underlying strength reasserted itself. The crops in the eastern provinces, which had withered under the weight of the Alpha's broken bond, began to push green shoots through the dead soil. The wolves who had gone feral returned to human form, shaken but whole. Trade routes reopened, market squares filled. The rhythm of ordinary life resumed. And on a warm evening in late spring, when the apple trees in the castle orchard were heavy with blossoms and the ash water ran clear and quick beneath the old stone bridge, Oriel gave birth. A boy came first, his cry sharp and indignant, his dark hair already thick, his tiny fists clenched as if prepared to fight the world from his first breath. He had his father's jaw and his mother's hands, and when the midwife placed him on Oriel's chest, his fingers curled around the edge of the claiming mark and held on. His sister followed minutes later, quieter, her entrance marked not by a cry, but by a soft breath, and the opening of eyes already amber. When Cale lifted her, his enormous hands cradling her impossible smallness, her skin shimmered, and for one brief, astonishing moment, a coat of dark golden fur rippled across her body before settling back into smooth, newborn skin. She shifted. Oriel breathed. For half a second, Cale said. He was weeping again. The Alpha King of Sorvain, the man whose name made warriors lower their eyes, stood in the birthing chamber with tears on his face, and a daughter the size of his forearm nestled against his chest. She wanted us to know what she is. Oriel reached for him. He settled on the edge of the bed with both children gathered between them. Through the bond, she felt everything he felt. Awe, gratitude. The staggering realization that these two lives existed because a mender's daughter had stitched a wound in a king's shoulder, and neither of them had looked away. Thank you, Cale said, for surviving when I could not protect you, for fighting when I could not fight beside you, for coming back to me when every rational thought must have told you to keep running. Oriel touched his face. Her fingers traced the crescent of tooth marks on his throat, the scar that matched her own. The marks that told the world, and each other, and their children, the only truth that had ever mattered. I never stopped coming back to you, she said. Even when I did not know I was doing it, even when I was running in the other direction, the bond always knew the way home. Cale leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers. Their children lay between them, warm and breathing and perfect. Home, he repeated, as if learning the word for the first time. Outside the window, the wolves of Sorvain began to howl. The sound rose from every corner of the valley, from the fortress walls and the forest edges, and the distant villages where wolves felt the birth pulse through the bond like a second heartbeat joining the first. Not war or grief or warning, celebration, completion. A story that had begun in darkness and ended in the sound of two small hearts beating for the first time. In the great chronicle of Sorvain's kings, a new page was being written. Not with the dry precision of political record, but with the messy, tear-stained hand of a story that had earned every word. The story of a mender who became a queen. Of a king who tore apart his own kingdom to find the woman the world told him he could not have. Of a bond that could not be broken by poison or politics or the cruelest distances that grief could build between two people who were never meant to be apart. And outside the castle walls, in the villages and farms that dotted the kingdom, mothers would tell their daughters a new kind of bedtime story. Not about princes who chose wisely or princesses who waited patiently, but about a woman with dirt under her fingernails who caught a silver blade with her bare hand, and a king who loved her enough to let the world burn until he could bring her home. Hide the pretty girls, the villagers had whispered when the Alpha King rode south. They did not know that the pretty girl was the one who would save them all. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.